Let me welcome, good evening. Let me welcome you on behalf of our president, Mr. Homa Petit, and our other trustees of the KR Kama Oriental Institute to this very interesting talk, which is in store for us by Dr. NiraliJosh on railways, civic engagement, and political class making in modern India. It is a topic which we will be hearing from our chairperson and Dr. Joshi. But let me begin by introducing our chairperson to you. Yogesh has been a very good friend of the Institute, and he has a very vast expertise and experience in academic matters, which he has used to promote a great deal of academic enterprise. Being an engineer by training, he launched into many other fields not related to engineering at all. In fact, if we look at his career, we see that he has spent a lifetime working with public trust, public charities, educational institutions. Presently, he is the course head at the Xavier's Institute of Communication on the course being journalism and mass communication. Earlier, he is still also the joint director of the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and has been the chief administrative officer at the Brihad Bharatiya Samaj. We had the pleasure of working with him also. He has worked extensively with the People's Union of Civil Liberties for more than a decade, edited their journal. Presently, he is also the trustee and honorary secretary of Mani Bhavan, former trustee of the Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum, and has been the former vice president, chairman of the finance committee and the library digitization program of the Asiatic Society. And his abiding interest remains in the field of human rights. I had the privilege of working with him when we were drawing the course content for our diploma in human rights at the University of Mumbai. So with this kind of a topic on railways and passenger rights, which Nirali will be talking about, I look and I hand over the proceedings to Yogesh.
Thank you, Nawaz Ben, for his nice words. Really thankful to the KR Kama Oriental Institute for inviting me to moderate this very interesting topic, a lecture on this very interesting topic. The topic being railways, civic engagement and political claim making in modern India. Now, it's out of the way topic in the sense that not many people would talk about it, not many people would even think about it. And it's such a fascinating topic. Dr. NiraliJosh, who has done her PhD from King's College London, and who is an alumnus of TISS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, has been working on this for a long time. And she has brought out a very interesting facet of the Indian railways. It's not just technology, it's not just commerce, it's not just passenger movement and all. But there are lots of things related to the railways in India. And let's have a little background about the railways in India. In fact, in India, the first train was started in 1837 in the Madras Presidency. It was called the Red Hill Railroad and was primarily used to carry granite. And in those days, the mobility was provided by animals and steam locomotives. But unfortunately, what began in 1837 closed down in just 8 years in 1845. And that is why even the government and the archival records mention that the passenger service, which began in 1853, 16th April 1853, was actually the beginning of the railways in India. That passenger service, which began in 1853 on the 16th April, was from Boribandar, which is very close to what is now called Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj terminus in Mumbai, to Thane, which is just on the outskirts of Mumbai, barely a distance of about 35 kilometers. And the First train started with 14 carriages, 400 VIP passengers, and with a salute of 21 guns. One of the VIP passenger was the wife of the then governor, Lord Falkland. And when this started, this service generated lots of response, I would not say reaction, from different people. The primary focus of this railway project was on passengers, and major geographical parts of India were bypassed, only for passenger movement, primarily the movement of the troops and goods, goods carrying people of the British Empire. Now the reactions or the responses that I talked about were twofold. Lord Falkland, who was the then governor of the Mumbai presidency, was himself very skeptical. He thought that it was a very silly project to undertake, but because it was foisted on him, he had to carry it out willingly, though his wife was one of the first passengers. On the other hand, when the railways started going a little bit further, there were special pujas and offerings were made to ward off the evil of the steam demon. People would prepare pujas and people will offer coconuts and all in the hope that this demonic thing will not cast a spell on their population or on their village or on their community. And that is how it all began. But there was one person who was quite prophetic and who had in fact told in 1853, in the year when the Indian Railways passenger service started, and that was Karl Marx. Karl Marx noted in his book, The Future of the British Rule in India, which was published in 1853, he noted, and I quote, "The railway system will therefore become in India the forerunner of modern industry, which it has become." So the skeptics like Governor Falkland or the frightened population whom the British called natives were proven wrong. And completely unanticipated and unintended consequences were realized through the medium of railways. One of which was, in fact, one of the first, what you call an association or activist movement in India, what is called the association or cooperative movement or the consumer movement, that also centered around railways. And that interesting phase of our railway, and please remember, it is not even 170 years. What started as a 35-mile journey, a 35-kilometer journey, is now more than 2,000 times. That is about 70,000 kilometers of the routes. Now, Dr. NiraliJosh has done a fabulous research on this, and I'm quite sure that she will bring out various aspects of how this, what Lord Falkland said, a stupid experiment, became what it is today. So over to Nirali.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody at the KR Karma Institute, especially Dr. Modi, Yasmin Khan, and Yogesh Kamdar. And Yogesh, again, for such an informative and relevant introduction to my talk today. So it offers a really nice springboard to start talking about the various things that comprise this little presentation. So today I'm sharing some of my ongoing research on formal platforms for public and railway engagement, with a focus broadly on the 19th century. And so I would just like to add that this is very much work in the formative stage, and so A, in the formative stage, and B, it is also very broad stroked. It covers a large period and possibly it is a little sweeping in the narrative, but it represents a work in progress. And this was this facet I was researching while undertaking research for my PhD, which was on the history of suburban accidents in Mumbai. And I was trying to look at how people have engaged with the railways on this issue. Have they at all, if at all? And what are the successes that has come through people's engagement, people's demand to address this kind of violence on the tracks. So while I was researching this historically, that is when I came across the activities of PATRA, which is the Passenger and Traffic Relief Association, set up in Bombay in 1915. So and that kind of opened up this, and I was trying to look at PATRA in existing scholarship on this issue, also undertaken by scholars, very kind of effectively undertaken by scholars such as Ritika Prasad already. So if for those of you more interested in this, hers is a great book to read. And that is Tracks of Change. So I hope to nuance this and detail this topic more in coming time. And I'm here to share what I have so far. Okay, so I will begin. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so railways, civic engagement, political claim making in modern India. In recent time, there's been a lot of upcoming scholarship, historical scholarship that kind of challenges or at least expands the dominant narratives of the Indian railways, of the colonial Indian railways, which are about, which have been largely about technological development, railways, either contesting or qualifying them as a modernizing project, their political economic instrumentality, especially in draining resources over to the colonial metropole, and their role in territorial consolidation and later nation building, and also to a certain extent, a certain amount of cultural romanticism, where this kind of travel and the romance of travel has been largely celebrated. So recently there is the scholarship that has been emanating. It has tried to build in over and into these narratives and try to kind of show that it's not just about whether the railways had a modernizing effect, but what was the nature of the modernity that was brought in. And secondly, that in all of this, the colonized natives, as Aparajita Mukhopadhyay has posited, they were not just bystanders in the process of imposition of imperial technology from above, and that really the Indians were actively seeking attention to their problems. They were demanding more facilities. They were making themselves visible and heard to the railway companies as well as the Indian government. It's a different matter whether they were addressed or not, but it was really not about just sitting back and enjoying either the benefits or the limitations of the railway, but it was putting themselves out there and making their voices heard. And Lisa Mitchell has also says very significantly that, and it is relevant in today's time too, that historically the experience of railway travel was one where one of the very first engagements that many people had with the Indian state. And that is, I think that is really important. That's something that is worth examining and interrogating even more in contemporary time, especially in post-colonial India, because scholarship on that phase is actually quite is less and definitely can be expanded. So when I talk, as I said, that the locals and that the natives were actively seeking facilities and expressing grievances. And this was because there was a condition of chronic under-provisioning. So from the start of whether Indians would actually, whether it was a stupid idea, as Yogesh has said, the railways came in, A, with the primary motive of moving commercial goods, and B, with this kind of an assumption that that Indians would not be A, motivated, or would not have the financial capacities, or would have actually little need to move long and short distances across the Indian subcontinent, and that they were really bound to their locations, and their traditional way of living, and to the immediate familial and kinship bonds. And travel wasn't something that they needed to incorporate into their lives. And as historians, including Ritika Prasad, has shown, this kind of fell flat on its face from the very initial days. So that was the reason why rakes for passenger traffic were actually kept quite low, and especially for the third class, which they assumed that maybe Indians would use it because of the low prices, low cost of travel, and it took off. So Indians were moving; they were getting into third class railway compartments, moving various distances, doing this, doing that, attending religious fairs, going out for trade, whatever, they were really moving. And almost 90% of the passenger traffic was constituted by those traveling in the third class. And lastly, a majority of those traveling third class were native Indians, to the extent that it became a very strong political position that it was third class travel that was actually affording first the higher class travel in those times, which is kind of an inversion of the narrative of that exists today. So again, from Prasad, 2015, let's have a look at the growth in passenger traffic in millions. So you see that from 1855, no, it was not just goods, but passenger traffic was really moving exponentially. And secondly, look at the proportion of third class passengers in relation to total passengers. And you can see that they really comprised almost 90% of passenger ship. And so then this became a kind of a vicious loop, because they were ringing in profits, but at the same time, the British had not initially imagined, or were later not neither were they later motivated to provide better facilities for the third class, because on the simple rationale that the more we invest, the more expensive it will become, and the lesser Indians would find an incentive to travel. And then this became a vicious loop. Every time people raised this issue and they got back saying, no, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. So then claim making became a continuing process. It was not that it stopped at any point of time. People said, but no, why? We need lavatories, we need better food, we need water, we need this, we need that, we need better ventilation, we can't breathe. We need better treatment from people associated with the railway. So how were they being seen and heard? So initially they were writing to newspaper editorials. You can go across archives of newspapers and there'll be letters and letters. Of course, limited to those who were literate. And it was largely the elite who were writing into the newspapers. They were also getting together. They were writing letters, sending petitions and memorials, and making representations to the railway companies and the Indian government. As I said, what were the demands and grievances? They were for more trains, more routes, more stations, more stops, more wagons, for platforms, shade, waiting rooms, drinking water, lavatories, food options, against unresponsiveness, mistreatment, and discrimination, and very prominently against overcrowding. If you're more interested in this, again, you can go and read chapter number 1 of Ritika Prasad's Tracks of Change, where she really details and nuances this very elaborately, and how overcrowding eventually became a symbolic gained symbolic importance even for the nationalist movement, and the condition of the railway passenger was something that gained a lot of political currency in later time. So here you see, this is a Matunga station petition, people from residents, and what are they asking for? They're asking for longer platforms, they're asking for accommodation, waiting rooms, shade, gates, etc. The second is one of the kind of letters being sent and saying, the BBCI, and this is, I traveled XYZ day, and then this is what happened to me. And there were lots and lots of these. So this is just one page of the number of signatures, but there were lots and lots of pages of people signing in these petitions and these memorials. By the late 1900s, you also had them kind of galvanizing into passenger associations. And here they're joining a large number of kind of representative associations that have been proliferating across modern, India in that time. You had trades associations, you had youth associations, you had religious associations. And so finally, that's when passenger associations also started taking shape across the subcontinent. What you see here on the left is the passenger association getting formed for the GIPR, which is the Great Indian Peninsula Railway, better known as the Central Railway to us today. And they have decided to come together initially to call themselves a daily passenger association, later on just the GIPR Passenger Association. And what are they nudged by? It's something we all know too well. There was a change in timetables and the locals were not being allowed to board fast trains. And then they said, we have to put this across, but we have to do this in a more organized way, and let's come together as a passenger association. At the same time, even in other representational associations, such as the Pune Sarvajanik Samaj, etc., everybody was raising this issue of overcrowding, saying this is just not acceptable, and this really needs visibility, this needs addressing. So broadly, from the 1890s to the 1920s, what is happening on the broader canvas? So there's a growing demand for self-governance and greater legislative representation of Indians in the state. The Indian Council Act, or the monumental reforms, as we know them, do offer this, but in a very limited way. The plight of third-class passengers finds increasing attention in the imperial as well as provincial legislative assemblies after 1909. And this exists alongside a continuing critique of the political economical detriments of colonial railway development for the people of India, as was regularly voiced by moderate political leaders such as Nauroji and Gokhale, and quite regularly featured in publications such as the Servants of India Society newsletters. But let us also remember that this is a time where on the political front, there is a crisis in the Indian National Congress, and tensions and splinters occur between the moderates and the extremists. Come 1915, again, some kind of a context, Gandhi arrives in India in January. The Indian National Congress commences on a process of re-galvanizing after that phase of splintering. And the Pune Provincial Conference is organized in mid-July 1915 after a hiatus of nearly 8 years. Gokhale has just passed away. Gandhi is in attendance at this conference, pays his tributes to Gokhale, but there is also a kind of, as described by various newspapers, etc., there's a kind of a tension in the air where the fate of the future of the Congress is being debated, but they're also trying to look for ways to galvanize. There are several resolutions that are passed and that are put forth and deliberated. And amongst these, those that are unanimously passed is a decision to take up the issue of dismal third-class railway conditions. So this is a snapshot of the day's proceedings at the Pune conference. This was resolution number 2 on the second day, which is the grievance of railway passengers. So a few members of the Congress returned to Bombay. By the end of the same month, they have set up the Passenger and Traffic Relief Association, or known as PATRA. It started with the object of inquiring into and ascertaining grievances with respect to passengers in India generally, to petition government, local bodies, railways, steamer, and other companies carrying passengers and traffic. So it was not actually envisioned to cater only to railway grievances. And thirdly, to take all proper and necessary steps for obtaining redress with regards to the said grievances, and to hold public meetings as necessary. This is from the PATRA internal communication. So broadly, this association takes off. It starts with a national outlook. It wants to address more broad-stroked issues with railway travel in India. It hopes to reach out to different passenger associations or encourage people across India to collectivize into such associations. It is strongly allied with the Indian National Congress. Several of its members are Congress members. It has a broadly elite composition and leadership, and this is as you can see, it was largely, its committee members largely comprised of rich Gujarati merchants, Gujarati and Jain merchants, or eminent political representatives from the Bombay presidency. And in that sense, it kind of falls quite neatly in line with what historians such as Ritika Prasad and NiraliJosh and everybody else have posited, that it was like the elite representation of elite mediation of subaltern issues. And also it was regionally active, largely in Bombay presidency, though it was supposed to be a pan-India organization. It had its headquarters in Bombay. Occasionally they would hold meetings in the Bombay presidency, such as Anand, where in 1922 their railway passenger conference was attended by Kasturba Gandhi and Sarojini Naidu. And so at various points of time, its management committee has been comprised by Madan Mohan Malviya. We know him as once the president of the Congress party, educationist and founder of Akhil Bharatiya Hindu Mahasabha. We had M.R. Jaikar, a barrister at the federal court and member of the Bombay Legislative Assembly from 1923 to 25, also a member of the Hindu Mahasabha. We have Gokul Das Morarji, who's a textile magnate. We have Ibrahim Rahimtullah, who was, amongst so many other things, a member of the Indian Tariff Association, part of the Bombay Municipal Corporation, and several other things. Lalubhai Samaldas, amongst other things again, who was instrumental in establishing several cooperative enterprises in India and was appointed to the Executive Council of the Governor of Bombay. And later on, Homi Talyar Khan, who was a Congress politician and served both in the Indian and Maharashtra state government. So really, as you can see, all of them are eminent figures and important political representatives whose voice should ideally have counted. What does Patra do? So from its founding, it is quite active. It identified various railway passenger issues, and these could be either about the racial discrimination, it could be about for more wagons for certain goods, for better rates for certain goods, for passenger amenities, and really there were wide-ranging issues that were raked up because they were active for several years, and they were year after year, trying to bring out issues and creating reports and having meetings to discuss the way ahead, making representations to the railway companies and the Indian government. They instituted a passengers day, kind of to generate a kind of a passenger's identity and a collectivized identity around this entity. They set up a passengers fund aimed at assisting poor passengers to fight against the railway companies. I do not have details about how successful that was or what happened to that fund, how actively it was used. It hosted talks and lectures by influential personalities, including N.M. Joshi, who was a prominent Indian trade union leader, and who is also somebody who, as part of the Bombay Legislative Council, championed several labor issues during his tenure. And so by 1930, it had a membership of around 315 or so. And these were members, you could just generally pay a subscription and become a member. And the committee operated through nomination and election, but you could just become a member, attend the meetings, have your say. So as I said, they instituted Passengers Day, and what this thing is just a snapshot of the kind of issues that were being taken up and the resolutions that were being passed year after year. Was it effective is another important question. I would say it was largely successful as a pressure group. It was quite successful in eliciting responses from, or at least garnering the attention of the railway companies and the state government, trying to tell them that here was a body of people who could not be ignored. And there were people who were aware, they were vigilant, and they were capable of kind of dialoguing and demanding based on information and knowledge and expertise. At the same time, the ability ability to elicit concrete responses from the railway companies was broadly limited. So it was about raising these issues, but really the kind of clout to the political clout to gather to actually get a response or remedial action was quite limited, I would say. So for an example, this is one instance of PATRA engagement in railway safety. So the railway board had been typically releasing, according to what was the trend in the UK, they were used to release a lot of accident inquiry reports and returns of accidents. And these could be purchased for a small amount. And I think the assumption would have been that nobody would be really interested from the public in purchasing them, but PATRA was procuring them. And so, and in 1940, PATRA writes to the railway board and kind of really brings out that I see that the railway is generally using rails that are very old and out of date. And is that true? And is accident number one caused due to this? And was it because of it? And so we're really like, decoding and interpreting all the findings of this report and posing these questions back to the railway board, which is in itself quite significant because nobody so far had been doing things like that. It was a technology which was far removed. It was the bureaucracy was also far removed. The governance has been quite closed, and so even to kind of really engage to make the effort for technical kind of decoding was an effort that hadn't been undertaken by people before, and it kind of unrattled the railway board a little bit, because in response the file shows the response of the railway board saying, hello, I mean, what is this? They can actually look at it, they can ask us some further questions, but this is like they're even giving suggestions to us. Do you think you should do this? And maybe you should do this. And this is not acceptable. And from now on, why should we even make these reports public? Maybe we should do one very detailed technical report for internal circulation, and maybe a public report that just gives facts, but not, more data. And we don't want these people coming back and asking us questions. And of course, the railway board puts this across in their letter to the PATRA quite sternly, and PATRA comes back saying that we didn't really mean to kind of, dictate terms to you, but we are just trying to engage. But eventually to the effect that this kind of information started being, tweaked or hidden or kept back. And so the effect is, of course, of making themselves seen and relevant, but at the same time being quite limited in their ability to garner any kind of a positive, concrete response. Meanwhile, railway infrastructure is massively appropriated to produce ammunition. Trains are prioritized for war supplies and troops, and railway fares were hiked to meet war expenses. And this is a tumultuous time again in Indian political history. The damages of the First World War, labor agitations, native user discontent had all built up to a momentum where the railway was compelled to consider the inconveniences of the native population, especially since these were peaking alongside a burgeoning nationalist movement. And because Gandhi had already launched a strong attack on the colonial railways regarding the condition of third-class travel in Ritika Prasad's work, diagnosing the condition of third-class passengers as symptomatic of India's colonial condition. So, this is about giving an identity to the passenger, which is not just about them being passengers, but really about a symbolic consolidation of India's broad colonial condition of racialized discrimination, of exploitation, etc. So, discontent occasionally, and by the first quarter of the 20th century, was increasingly taking more extreme forms like sabotage. And there were trains, the tracks were getting exploded, trains were getting sabotaged. And so all of this kind of, the broader picture was such that it compelled the railway and the colonial state to take some pay attention to this, take note. And what does it culminate in? In 1921, you have the Ackworth Committee. Ackworth is brought in with largely a pacificatory role. He tours extensively across India, speaking to various stakeholders, as one may say, tradespersons. It speaks to labor, he speaks to passenger associations people. And so he's assigned the dual task of prescribing measures to better the financial health of the railway, again, after war damages, to integrate an institutional response mechanism for native passenger grievances in India by first verifying if they were true. So key recommendations are the separation of the railway budget from the general budget, reorganization of the railway board, setting up a rates tribunal because there was this tribunal because there was a strong grievance was that in the rates being charged were actually detrimental to Indian goods. So he suggested, okay, we should set up a rates tribunal. And importantly, he proposes a 3-tiered advisory council structure for addressing passenger issues. So this is from the Ackworth Committee report. We lay stress on the importance of giving to the Indian public an adequate voice in the management of their railways. And accordingly, we recommend the establishment of central and local railway advisory councils. We propose that the Central Advisory Council, under the chairmanship of the Minister of Communications, would consist of not more than 25 members, of whom 3 or 4 would represent the departments of the government. 8 or 9 should be nominated according to the scheme to be arranged by the various associations representing trade and industry, and a similar number to represent agricultural interests and the traveling public, and should be added by nomination by one member by each of the provincial legislative councils. So really about creating a formal platform to incorporating all stakeholders and trying to kind of alleviate do away with this notion that the railway was hostile and that they were not doing enough, that they were discriminatory. They said, let's make us. It was largely imagined as a platform where the railway would make itself appear, at least, in front of the people, which was so far lacking. Now, so there is a significant amount of importance attributed to the local advisory councils. But if you look at the agents of the railway companies and their approach, so this is an excerpt of a speech by the agent of the Madras and Southern Maratha Railway at the Indian Railway Conference in 1922. And a part of an excerpt from the speech says that this proposal of advisory councils is one which we can all cordially welcome, so long as the functions of these committees are no more than advisory, as has been provided for adequately by the rules laid down by the government. It will always be useful to listen to the opinions of practical businessmen, and their advice will often be valuable. Railways have been subject lately to a good deal of adverse criticism, both by the public and the Legislative Assembly. Much of this criticism is believed to be due to a lack of knowledge on the efforts made by the railways to provide amenities for passengers, and to the ignorance of railway limitations and difficulties. The free discussion of complaints and ventilation of ideas should do much to remove misunderstandings and foster public confidence in the genuine desire of all railway administrations to find adequate and reasonable solution to the various problems of passenger convenience and efficient transportation. So really this actually sets the tone of what the local advisory council eventually end up doing. They do receive a lot of, they do invite inputs, but at the same time, the response largely is that, okay, we've heard you out, but listen, we are also doing our best. If it's not financially viable to us, and viable means profitable, not just like striking even or doing with smaller profits, but if it's not profitable to us, then we might not be able to undertake the requested activity or the requested improvement. So this is the composition of these advisory councils. They commenced in 1924. Mind you, the LSC of the Great Indian Peninsula Railway has members such as Firoz Setna and M.R. Jayakar. In the BBCI, we have Fazal Rahimtullah and Lalji Narayanji. These meetings were held quite regularly, a range of issues put forth, but concrete remedial action again still remained largely determined and limited by concerns for profitability. Also, importantly, there was really no formal representation for passenger associations. And although they had proliferated across regions and routes, there was no direct nomination. And this remained a bone of contention for Patra, which lobbied hard for its inclusion. Patra pulled its strings within the political network to raise this with the Railway Board and the Government of India, especially through M.R. Jayakar, who raised questions in the Legislative Assembly and communicated the matter to the Railway Board. So on the right is a set of questions that Patra kind of designed for Mr. Jaikar to use to raise in the Legislative Assembly in 1930. And what is this? What does this say? It says it asks questions such as how many passengers associations are there in India? Who are the founders, presidents, and secretaries? When were they started? What were their funds? Does the local government contribute to their funds? Have they got representations on the local advisory committees? And basically trying to say that is the government actually aware that there is this really strong body of people? Do you even know how many are there? Do you know how they're thriving? Has the local government or the state government taken interest in them? And importantly, are they representative in these very important advisory committees that have been set up? This is largely unsuccessful, and Patra does not get direct representation on the passenger associations. Members of Patra accuse the Railway Board of exclusionary practices. They treat us like untouchables. They do not even send us reports of the proceedings. Nature of their transactions are such that there seems to be little to reveal and much to conceal, and hence they are operating in these kind of very shady ways, and they don't open up to our bodies and associations. What happens? How does the Railway Board respond? It kind of very flatly says, we've heard you out and all said and done, but I don't think passenger associations can find direct representation because they're not going to be, any passenger association is not going to be representative in any case. And so picking and choosing is going to be difficult. And so the first letter actually says that there are already people in the trade and industry who want more representation. So we really don't have space for passengers to have a seat. The second one tries to be a little more diplomatic, saying that it'll be very tricky for us to pick and choose and nominate somebody specific. And at the same time, if it is so, then why all the members that are incoming from the Legislative Assembly, etc., why don't you tell the Legislative Assembly to nominate a member from the Passenger Association to come into their seat? So there is a kind of a flat out refusal to attend to this request. And this, as I said, it remains a sore topic for the Patra throughout. Okay, so the situation continues largely to independence. And yes, local advisory committees were conducted quite regularly, but without passenger representation. Post-independence, there's the nationalization and reorganization of the railways. In 1953, Lal Bahadur Shastri replaces all local advisory committees and announces rail user consultative committees in place of them. These are organized at national, zonal, and divisional levels, with big cities endowed with additional suburban level units. Broadly structured on the previous model of advisory councils, but this time, as I said, passenger associations had formal representation. At the same time, so did other stakeholders, such as those vendors and everybody, all these subsidiary businesses that operate around railway premises. So maybe the advertise guy who handles the advertising, maybe their association would send in a member, or those who are running stalls and food, etc. So now, so what happens is that what I would in the formative stages of trying to look at now, because I do think that the post-independence period is significantly under-researched, under-interrogated, that RUCCs, the Rail User Consultative Committees, they significantly transform the political nature of these platforms, because they could actually, there were the aspirants for positions on these were people who could also actually see themselves moving up the ladder, so you could actually, maybe if you found a seat in the local rail user committee, you could maybe next go into the zonal one, maybe next get nominated into the regional one, the national one. And hence there was a certain amount of individual and personal political aspiration that got kind of looped into this thing of only raising passenger related issues, or local political aspirations, or to be politically relevant in their local context. Also that it was common for RUCCs to get disbanded with every change in government. So even if they did not run their full tenure, if there was a change in government, a change of railway minister, this entire, the whole lot of people who had been nominated would get disbanded. Sometimes the meetings were irregular, they were often ill-attended, not all posts were filled, and merchants associations and chambers of commerce remained overrepresented. And of course, as maybe rightly predicted by the railway board earlier, under the colonial railways, there was a fair amount of rivalry amongst leaders of passenger associations for nomination. And another important thing was that the railway ministry had gotten formed by then, and hence there were a lot of these grievances that were being routed through members of parliament and being posited to the railway ministry directly. So now there's a splintering of the railway board and the railway ministry. There's a lot of kind of these complaints coming in through this route. And then there are all these irregular user committees. And overall, the effect is that it became very fragmented, the response, So there was, earlier one could say that because there was some kind of a common villain in the form of the colonial state, that there was a certain amount of positive action that could be demanded, concrete. But later on, this became very fragmented. In fact, while the state became the railway, it had the adverse effect of actually fragmenting this process. And what about Patra? So for several years, Patra did remain active alongside and separate from the RUCCs. In fact, railway officials started attending their meetings and attending to the demands and queries. In its general meeting of 1950, the president of Patra highlights this, saying top-ranking officials of railways and other transport agencies have evinced a keen desire to do everything to resolve our grievances. It finds representation on the Traffic Advisory Committee under the chairmanship of the Commissioner of Police. However, more broadly, its activities narrowed over time to Mumbai and more specifically to suburban railway commuter issues. And alongside, as we know, that across Mumbai and its two commuter routes, several more local, suburban, and city-level passenger bodies emerged. You had the Bombay Pravasi Sangh, you have the Bombay Suburban Commuters Association, you may have the Western Railway Commuters Association, or the Western Suburbs, the Eastern Suburbs, and there were several other such bodies that came up, and hence Patra was not necessarily the most significant one. A lot of its members were no longer politically that powerful or influential to lobby. And also that when I met one of the key members in around 2017, he said that actually we have not been able to so regularly convene our meetings, but simply for the fact that their office is located on a higher floor and the building is without a lift, and several of these committee members have been aging and finding it difficult to access the stairs, and saying that, oh, now we have a lift and maybe we will reconvene. So but also goes to show that there has not been a transfer of agency or kind of the committee's activities, or that membership is maybe too diluted and leadership has not managed to kind of rotate, evolve into newer issues or into a newer generation. That there can be a wide range of aspects to this, which I have not really delved into in so much detail. So that's what is about Patra and this broader. So we do still have RUCCs now, and in fact, they're functional since the past 10 years or so. I think in Bombay, at least, they've been quite active. That's also because there's been a greater thrust for coordination across and communication across, not just public and the railway, but across levels of governance and the railway too. And this is an ongoing process which kind of started during the time of MUTP and continues to now. Not that MUTP triggered it, but if you really look at a time frame, then from the early 1990s to now. So my broader exploration going forward is exactly what kind of political identity or nature of political action has actually been effective in responding to the needs of a very wide-ranging traveling public, especially in post-colonial India. Because as we see, if my kind of a suggestion is that passenger associations have had relevance. They've done, I mean, for their local populations, of course, there are things important, such as getting their platform repaired, or if some part of their station, the bulbs need to be replaced so that they become more safer in the night, or safety issues, or any kind of provisioning. Of course, these things are important, and but at the same time, what happens to claim making for better service, for better overall services, for specific routes, for people who really need trains, for example, the migrant labor and their needs and their cyclical needs. And so which are the routes that different people have been deploying or have successfully managed to deploy? What is the scope of civic political action, and which political identity actually attracts some kind of attention or concrete response from the state for passenger related issues, is something which I hope to unpack with time. And so and as I said, that then they have been varied. We know that there have been while passenger associations have been so localized and fragmented, we do have rail rocos, we have pathar, the stone agitations, because there is a frustrated public which has been facing a lot of difficulty in commute, and hence there are these various other ways of claim making which really need to be seen as active claim making. But which of these does what, and which political identity is created by which of these means, is something that I find interesting and I hope to examine further. So with that, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Nirali. It was wonderful. You brought out a wide spectrum of issues, and you also brought out the unintended consequences that what began, in the words of Lord Falkland, as a silly project, what is now called Indian Railways. And you brought out lots of ironies, that people's participation in such an intense manner, and also the fear that they had at the beginning. But there are ironies, associated with Indian Railways. For example, we had a very dynamic leader called George Fernandez. In 1974, he gave a call for Chakka Jam, rail band, and he succeeded almost 100% in bringing railway to a paralytic stop. And the same man, after 15 years, becomes the railway minister of India. So such ironies are very much there, and you brought them out very well. And now I throw it open to the audience. If they have any queries or clarifications or any suggestions to make, please welcome. And please introduce yourself.
I can see one question, and maybe just Mr. Rana want to voice it, I mean, or should I read it out, or how do you want to go about it?
Yeah, please read it out.
Yeah. So what was Gandhi's view on the railway? Did he tell people to boycott the railway even though he himself was traveling? So yeah, this is, and once again, Ritika Prasad's book, I don't have it here, is actually details this out in detail quite well. But also primarily that in that, as scholars have shown, that though the call was to actually boycott the railway, but that was the kind of instrumentality of the railway, the colonial instrumentality of the railway, and hence but he also, along with other leaders, recognized that the railway was physically was a way to move, and that the railway station was a place to congregate, and hence that is one thing, that there is a separation. Is not about saying that I use the railway, it means that I endorse it, but that I will use the railway because it's a part of this land, and it's a way to reach out to people. But that does not mean that I'm here to I endorse what the railway is doing. And there are, and this is not that straightforward also. For example, in Prasad's work, she talks about how there is this condition of the third class passengers and sanitation issues, but also so Gandhi raises them and then also tries to talk about how people should be clean and healthy themselves. So there is this kind of a thing about, right, you know, what aspect of the railway is being critiqued, but very broadly, if the boycott or the kind of a stand against the railway is very much a part of the other boycotts at the national in the national arena, and him traveling was not necessarily to be seen as him endorsing the railway in that sense. Yeah.
Any other query? If anybody wants to supplement something, that also is welcome. Nawaz Ben?
No, I was just wondering that when you did mention about political parties affecting the composition of various bodies. So would the decisions also be changed or attempted to be changed?
So the thing is, what I have tracked so far is actually trying to see the broad statistics on when the RUCCs were formed or dissolved, etc. Earlier, the local advisory committees would their reports are very freely available, that you can actually see in detail. This is with the RUCCs, that every detailed book per se is something that a file I have not been able to access. Because post-independence archives, as I mentioned, are kind of there are several files that even the National Archive is waiting to receive. For example, at the National Archives, or any archive, at least they have to wait for a 30-year period, after which you should start sending your files. And that also, I think, there's a certain amount of discretion in that. So the National Archives just has lesser stuff on the Rail User Committee proceedings, and it's possible that a lot of them would be at the zonal or thing, and that involves asking for permissions at each of these zonal things, and hence but if I were to assume, then yes, maybe the decisions would be different, but also in that sense, if you look at the broader trajectory of the railway in political area, there has not been in so many years some very kind of radical change in the way railways have been run, even though the political parties have changed. In that, a thing about nobody has suddenly come and said we're going to turn it over and we'll have like 15 bogies for the poor, for the third class or unreserved or whatever. So there has been a very broad kind of I think that has had a little bit of planing out, regardless of the political parties, but also that despite political parties changing and the RUCC is getting disbanded, there's also the railway board, which has been very powerful. So the railway board can still has a lot of, finally it is the railway board that decides, right? And railway board is something that is independent of the political parties. So the one thing is about the demand making might have changed with the composition of the RUCCs, but the response could possibly have been more even because the railway board stays as an executive all throughout and is an independent body.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. If
yes, please.
am I audible? Yeah, this is Kerman here. Yeah. Nirali, thank you for the enlightening talk. Thank you very much. This topic is obviously new for me, so it was good to know. My question pertains to something that you mentioned about the third class travelers subsidizing, or rather, I'm not sure of the economics how it works. So did you mean to say that the finances were driven by the more passengers who were traveling by third class, and is that the same now? I mean, how do the economics work in this case?
So in the earlier times, during that time, it was within passenger ship, though there were goods, and then sometimes there would be rakes that would be attached to the goods trains, or then there would be later, more dedicatedly passenger trains introduced. And comparatively, the number of people using the first class and the second class, so according to, if I quote from Prasad and others, there is somebody from the railway administration saying that, if I'm happy if the first and second class stay away, they don't make a difference to us, because they don't bring us so many earnings. But the third class passenger ship kind of needs to be retained because they are bringing us significant revenues. So they were, in terms of maybe subsidizing is maybe a stronger word to use over there, but they weren't, the higher classes weren't making any difference to railway revenues regardless base. But the third class passengers definitely were. They were, as I said, that they were comprising. So in terms of volume also, they were 90% of the traffic thing. But in terms of the revenues from passenger traffic also, they were 90% of whatever, and which made it viable to actually afford passenger traffic in itself, at that point of time. Current in the recent scenarios, there is this very strong, there is the argument that third, unreserved and the lower classes are subsidized by the higher classes. It is something which I think I would refrain from commenting absolutely upon, because railway finances are complex in a way. There is the economic analysis of the railway is also kind of limited in a certain way, or at least for non-experts. Then there is also not too much knowledge of whether the railway actually breaks even or actually goes at a loss in terms of even despite subsidizing, So then to kind of go out there and say, oh, definitely one is affording the other in a socialist kind of a setup is something that I would not so confidently claim, also because I don't have enough data on that. Yeah.
Thank you. That was clarification. Thank you. Yeah.
Any more questions? Mr. Darwala, do you have anything else to add?
No, I was just curious. I missed parts of the talk, but so what happened? Patra existed till which year? As in, and what is is it an equivalent existing organization now which looks after, as in, which is taken off from that, or?
Yeah, so Patra very much exists today. It is it has a office in Fort. I forget the name of the building. And I actually visited the office in, I think, 2017, and I met one of the members, and that was, they were just starting to reconvene, as I said, because a lift had been installed in that building. But so they very much exist. There's a committee, there's an organizing committee. At that point of time, if I remember correctly, it was a very short meeting at that time, and they were starting to deliberate about what can we do as we come together now, like what kind of passenger issues can we take up, what is relevant in today's, how are we relevant in today's time. And that was actually that was something that came up, and that was something that they were discussing, and also kind of thinking about the bus passengers and whether they should be actually now starting to look at that, and what was happening, what was the status of the membership, and stuff like that. So they were actually at that point of time rekindling their activities, but on paper they have been they have never dissolved. They're very much there, and I don't know after 2017 how things have gone, but as I said, that alongside Patra there is a large number of bodies. As we know, I think all of whoever is living in a kind of a suburb might have one local passenger association with their station, associated with their station. So there are so many more, but Patra on paper still exists.
I see. And it's interesting to note that overcrowding has remained the issue from the past 100 years. It never seems to be, I mean, it's as relevant now as it has, perhaps it was 100 years ago. Yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it was just kind of at this point of time, there have been different rationales explaining overcrowding at some point of time. I mean, in our thing, we say, oh, these are poor person's railways, and we are always cash strapped or something. And in the past, it was like just like outright denial of the willingness to actually invest more in them. So somehow or the other, they always remain under-provisioned, chronically kind of discriminated.
Thank you. Appreciate your. Yeah.
Anyone else who has anything to add or ask?
A lot of decisions taken by presently over the years have been politically motivated. Where to have the railway located, where to start a railway, where, because it involves a lot of recruitment jobs. So what kind of role would Patra and other such bodies play in this kind? Can they have a say? Have they had a say? Have any illustration of that?
In
Each
terms of
railway minister wants something in his
Yes.
own constituency.
Yeah. So I think in terms of these kind of like routes, and one thing is that from whatever I know, taking up labor issues per se has been limited. Like I don't, because they have identified themselves as a passenger association in terms of, so that's one aspect that never really featured. But more broadly with Patra, it has over time, especially post-independence, it has come down to a lot to suburban railway. We need to Bombay and the suburban railway. So this broader thing about within that, where to locate a station, etc., I'm sure that could have come. So if for example, Kanjurmarg maybe decided it badly needed a station or something, that could be something that Patra could have possibly, lobbied for and put across. And that's something that even its passenger associations do, actually, in a way. But these broader, for example, I mean, if I take a very broad of like the bullet train, I don't think at that level there is any of these bodies that can actually engage. The kind of that scale is different. But it's really in that for Bombay, these associations work because there is this whole sense of a commuter kind of there is a commuter identity that is there. I'm not sure whether in Delhi metro users associations are starting to get formed and something similar or something like that. But broad big decisions, I don't think Patra has in the past or even recently kind of taken up in a way. And also, if you look at Bombay, big decisions in routes and all have anyway been like, whatever we've had chota lines which are getting incrementally increased. There's never been this until the metro came up. Maybe now there has never been this thing that, oh, we're going to revamp the system. Everything has been achieved incrementally, chota. So that's where possibly passenger associations have been saying things. People have been saying things. Other members have been saying things from the political parties, but there has never been this broad, like, we want this route now or accomplishing it either. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nawaz. I think it was a very important question that you raised. And that also will trigger Nirali to look into another aspect of our research, which would be quite interesting for us to, and we look forward to our book or further publications for all that. Now, if there is no further question or no further input from others, may I just thank Nirali for her scintillating talk and very informative and useful insight into the functioning of the railways and how around the railways lots of civic activities were involved and created and agitated and all that. So that was a wonderful talk, Nirali. Thank you so much. Now, may I request Dr. Nawaz Modi to take over and conclude the proceedings?
Thank you, Yogesh. If some of you who might have attended Dr. Alistair's lecture may recall Dr. Nirali's interventions. I found those interventions so interesting that I got back to her and I asked her to come and speak to us on this particular topic. I'm really happy that we pursued the matter and she agreed to be there. So we are really grateful to you because it's opened up a new vista of areas which we know very little about. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute's first venture into a speaker abroad. So we hope that this will be the forerunner of many such speakers with whom we have very good links in London and all over, in fact, the world. Thank you, Yogesh, for once again helping us and chairing this session so ably. And both the introduction and the concluding comments were very useful and appropriate. I would just like to announce that the Institute will be once again advertising the Avabai Wadia Research Fellowships. And those of you who might be interested are most welcome to apply for these scholarships. Thank you very much. We hope to see you at our next lecture, which will be a presentation by an Avabai Wadia Research Fellow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all the questions. And thank you again, Dr. Modi, Yasmin, and Yogesh.
Thank you. And
Yeah, pleasure. Bye.